All right, Sweaty Fantasy Football Podcast, episode number 7. I'm Justin. Trevor and Zach are with me today. It's a pretty brutal time of the off season. We were just chatting before the podcast, just making sure we didn't miss any news. We have literally no news to talk about. I mean, there's some training camp buzz. There's lots of hype videos. This player's looking good with this player. There's no pads. Really, all that there is a couple injuries, couple battles that won't be decided for another 3 months. Um, so we don't have any news. What we're gonna do today, we did our mock draft last week. That episode will be up by the time you are seeing this. And so we were kind of going through and looking where players were drafted. We're gonna have our bust and must episode. Just kind of look at some players that we think are drafted way too low, way too high, kind of give our takes on that. And then Zach said he was cooking up a three-way trade, so we might have some trade conversations by the end of the podcast. We'll see.
That's so ugly, bro. It's so ugly. How you feel about
Uh-oh.
Pat Fryer? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's hard, but yeah, we'll see what we got.
Yeah, not touching Pat. Can't do it. There's just no way.
Hey, trade him before Johnny Smith comes into town.
Yeah, you're right. I gotta hold him. I gotta hold him.
Yeah. Mm.
He's a
All
hold
right,
till Johnny Smith's in Miami for the season.
there you go. So like I said, no news, no trades went through in our dynasty league this week. We had some people itching. Some trades were close. I had trade talks with like about four different people, and a couple of them fell apart pretty quickly as they were abysmal trades. A couple of them got close. We couldn't get pieces together. I'm not going to tell you which one yours was in, Trevor, but yours was in one of those buckets.
Oh man. I know we're gonna disagree on which bucket it's in, but we can keep going on that.
Yeah. So I'm sure we'll have lots more trades. Um, like I said, we've got some people itching to make trades. It's just news is pretty scarce and people are holding on to their tight players, holding on tight to their good players. Good grief. They're also holding on to their tight players, their tight ends. We were talking about this before the episode, like trading for a true difference maker, a difference maker tight end. Like if you want to trade for Laporta, McBride, Bowers, Kittle, it's
Evan Ingram.
basically Evan Ingram, yeah, Pat Fryermuth. It's just not working. Trevor, you want to tell us about your tight end woes?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to trade for Tyler Warren, I was asked for two first, and I said a first plus is in play, and I got smacked with the left on red. McBride, I offered I would say pretty close. I had two firsts in that offer with McBride, and it was McBride, Chase Brown, Cortland Sutton, Gesicki, and two firsts. That was left on red. No surprise there. And then yeah, obviously the George Kittle discussions. Me and Justin were planning on blowing up the league, but Justin doesn't want to follow through, so we're not going to do that.
So you're
But
telling
yeah,
me
it's
that
it's
so you're telling me that my trade wasn't the only one that Gesicki, Sutton, and two firsts was on the table for?
no, sir. No, sir.
I didn't
Not that
think
I
there
hate
was.
Sutton. I'm totally fine with Gesicki and Sutton on my team to start the season, but
You just
would
prefer him
prefer
on
some other
somebody else's
options.
team.
Yeah, those are both guys that more than likely will not be touching my starting lineup. So why not try to move them?
There you go. I mean, that's
Yeah.
pretty good. Um, all right, we'll hop right into our busts. We'll start off with the negative. Like I said, last episode we did a 12 team PPR redraft, kind of our first lay of the land on how everybody's being drafted on ADPs this time of year. So Trevor will kick us off with he claims it's one of the easiest bust picks that he's seen.
Yeah, this is an easy pick. You are not drafting Rashee Rice at 42. You just aren't. He's projected to be the wide receiver 20, ADP at 42. And don't get me wrong, last year, the start to the season was incredible. Like we were looking at him, is Rashee a top 15 dynasty wide receiver asset? That game, I think he had 27.9, then he had 16, and then he had 28, but then he got injured. He had a devastating knee injury. And unfortunately, that just took him out of in my opinion, that took him out of the top three receivers on that team. And I don't think that he ever had to compete with a locked in Xavier Worthy. And he also didn't have to compete with Hollywood Brown because Hollywood Brown was out all of the irregular season. They brought in Jalen Royals, who player comps to him almost exactly, who he's also going to take some time in the slot as well. And I mean, that's where we saw Rashee Rice a lot was in the slot. So we bring in Jalen Royals, who comps extremely well, is I believe 2 years younger and doesn't have legal troubles and is I think he's an inch shorter and a little bit faster. Inch shorter doesn't help, but a little bit faster definitely does. The legal issues with Rasheed, just another reason not to touch him. You never know if the NFL is just going to make an example out of him or if they're going to wait. That knee injury is just the biggest bugger for me, though. And then also just Xavier Worthy asserting himself as the clear number one on that offense. When Xavier Worthy was drafted, it was seen as a reach. And it was seen as like he's this one-dimensional just speedster, but he's very clearly not. And I think that Rashee Rice has a massive uphill climb to meet this ADP, especially when you can get players like DK Metcalf. And don't get me wrong, I'm not super stoked on DK Metcalf in terms of his, quarterback position, but you can get DK Metcalf, and I'm trying to pull up the other players that you could get around there.
So I have
You can
the
get
draft
Devontae
board
Adams
shared.
there. Oh, I see it
So
right there. So Rasheed Rice, like, yeah, you can get DJ Moore, Marion Hampton. I mean, even Devontae Adams, like Devontae Adams with Matthew Stafford, who's going to be throwing the ball hopefully 45, 50 times a game, maybe. We'll see. Because Kyron's going to take a big step back, as I talked about last episode. But I think that Metcalf or Devontae Adams are solid to better options there.
and
Yeah,
James Cook,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, and James Cook, Chuba, like you said already, there's lots of good options. Even just going further down the board, you want to take a shot on in my opinion, the last elite tight end on the board, George Kittle. If you want to take a swing on Joe Burrow, um, there's a lot of good options there, and it just seems like the Chiefs do what they need to do to win, and what they need to do to win right now is not to have Mahomes throw 5,000 yards and 45 touchdowns. And so I think that hurts Rashee Rice a little bit if that suspension. I haven't seen anything. I'm curious if you guys have seen anything on his suspension. It seems like it's just kind of been this nebulous situation for the past 2 years where everybody says, well, maybe he's going to get suspended, and the can just keeps getting kicked down the curb. Um, and I mean, if you believe in Xavier Worthy, um, I think the argument against this pick would be if you don't believe Xavier Worthy is the guy, Travis Kelce, he's obviously getting older, so I think there's an opportunity there if he wants to step up into it. I think for redraft, if you're looking at a guy who you're gonna miss for the first 4 weeks, potentially, or whenever the suspension comes, if it does, if you're gonna miss a couple weeks and then come back to breaking up Mahomes' 200 yard and a touchdown, maybe two every week if their defense stays as good as it was, then Rashee Rice is not going to pay off in the fourth round.
Yeah, I think Rasheed Rice has a huge range of outcomes. You know what I mean? There are worlds where he outperforms this ADP. There are worlds where he comes back and kind of takes the role back from Xavier Worthy, the design touches role, the kind of short to intermediate route role. I think that's again just kind of a long road for him. I wouldn't be betting on that to happen, but there's a world, he could outperform this ADP, but there are just so many outcomes where he can't. There are outcomes where he is a less talented wide receiver than both Royals and Worthy. There's an outcome where the looming suspension, the legal troubles, that kind of derail his career, his opportunity. There are worlds where, like we all watched like it happened. I believe it was in prime time when Patrick Mahomes rolled through his knee. Like there are worlds where he doesn't have that same juice, that same lateral agility that made him such a weapon after the catch. So drafting him, there are worlds where it pays off, but there are just a lot of worlds where at ADP 42, like that's probably the what is that, the mid third, I think, if you're playing in a 12-team league. So many worlds where you get next to nothing out of Rashee Rice this year. And that can actively hurt you at that draft position. I can agree with the fade of Rashee Rice pretty heavily.
So I looked it up just to double check. The legal update is that there isn't a legal update. I guess maybe some news is Jordan Addison's DUI trial got scheduled. So we might see a suspension of maybe a game or two coming down the pipe for that. But Rashee Rice, I mean, there hasn't been anything so far. So if it gets kicked down the can, if the can keeps getting kicked far enough, then it might not even affect this season. It might be a late season suspension. So I don't know that that's, I mean, that wasn't really part of your argument, but just something to look for is that that's not really something that looks like it's coming this year.
Yeah, and I mean, even if he plays all 17 games, I just don't see him performing up to the standard of even somebody like DJ Moore or somebody around there, like maybe even Mike Evans, even though, Igbuka's coming in and maybe him, McMillan and Igbuka are going to compete. I feel like I'd still be picking Mike Evans over Rashee Rice right now.
All right, Zach, you want to take it away with your first bust or your only bust pick? This is a spicy
Yeah.
name.
Yeah, this I'm sure that you are not happy to hear this as a
I'm
Puka
not.
Nacua owner in Dynasty, but there it is. Puka Nacua is my bust. Really was just kind of targeting high ADP here. Just maybe I don't believe that taking him could really derail your season. But he's going right now. He's at number 8 in the overall ADP. He's your wide receiver 5. And I just have a hard time spending that on Puka Nacua in a situation that is again kind of a lot of ways this could go wrong. His best season, his rookie season, when he played all 17 games, he finishes overall wide receiver 4. Um, and since then, they've added target competition. I think this iteration of Devontae Adams is probably better than what Cooper Kupp looked like last year. He's an extremely physical wide receiver, and that's definitely a plus in his game. But he does miss not just entire games. I think he missed 5 games last year, but I think that's going to be part of his profile is that he's maybe a little more injury prone because of the way he plays. That is the main reason he slipped to the 5th round of the draft is because he's extremely physical, gets dirty in the run game. I think that if he misses again 3 to 5 games, it's really hard to pay off that wide receiver 5 ADP. And then we have I don't think we're at the cliff yet for Matthew Stafford, but there are some signs with Matthew Stafford of maybe not being able to deliver the super high end that he carried you to a Super Bowl with. I think there are flashes of it still. You definitely still see games where he looks like vintage Matthew Stafford, but in some of the worst games last year, some of the stuff we don't remember as well because our most recent memories are of him hanging 40 on the Bills and him hanging with the Eagles in the playoffs. But earlier in the season, especially, his efficiency numbers are kind of down a little more. I don't think his arm has lost it, but we've also had injury concerns with Matthew Stafford over the years. So there's definitely worlds where there's some regression there. I just think it's not an environment that I'm super excited buying into with a first round pick. I think that you look at all the wide receivers who are going around there. I think Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, Drake London, Amon Ra, I think those are all kind of going in the same area. And I believe that all of them provide a floor that I don't really think that Puka Nacua has. And I think that the ceiling is with all of them very similar. And I do think that there's a higher ceiling with some of those guys than exists with Puka Nacua, just with the target competition brought in and the state of the offense.
I will say Matthew Stafford has in my opinion, he's still I mean, I think of that Eagles game last year in the playoffs. The Rams were the closest thing to beating the Eagles. I mean, they ran over the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but they were super, super close. Stafford had a back shoulder fade, a toe tap to Puka Nacua at the end of that game where it was just like, this is like he put the ball in only a spot that Puka could get it, and Puka went up and got it. The injury concern is very concerning to me. That's really what I'm worried about. I think if he plays 17 games, then he's almost a lock for top five and has the potential. He's one of the only guys that has the true potential to be a number one receiver, in my opinion. Um, Now, I will say their defense is getting better, which you don't love for fantasy. And for dynasty purposes, I think it's kind of a bet on Sean McVay to kind of figure it out. They had that trade with the Falcons this year where they got an extra first. So you could see maybe if they're at 15, they move up to they package a player and a first and this year's first and move up into the top three or something crazy and maybe go get Arch Manning or I don't know. That's kind of projecting way out. Um, I do get what you're saying though. Like when you look, I still have the our draft pulled up. Amon-Ra, Nico, Malik went right after him. Brian Thomas. Even you go into the second round, you have Genty and Drake London, McCaffrey. Um, there's some players there that are probably a little bit safer. McCaffrey isn't really safer, but there's some players there that are safer bets. Like Amon-Ra right after him. If you flip those two because you want a safer build, I wouldn't blame you at all. I think injury is a massive concern. I don't think anybody outside of maybe Micah. I don't know. Micah has a player evaluation issue, in my opinion. Nobody outside of Micah thinks that Puka's a bad player. I should ask Micah if he thinks
Is
that
that
Puka has
real?
no
Is this
talent.
a real take? Are we serious? I haven't heard this.
Oh, well, he's only said that about Jalen Waddle that I've heard.
Okay,
But,
okay. Wow.
but
I almost like hung up and texted him. Jesus Christ. Don't get me wrong, Puka Nacua is easily a top I think very comfortable in like the top 6 to 8 wide receivers in the league. Super talented. And betting on talent with Sean McVay and a quarterback who, as of right now, this moment right now, is still a top quarterback in the league. Like, yeah, I mean, betting against that it can be scary. I just see a lot of ways it goes wrong. And I do feel safer. I like drafting for floor early in the draft. I'll draft for my upside later. I like drafting for a little bit of floor, get me into the playoffs and let me roll dice week 15, 16. That's kind of a little more the way I like to lean. And I see some red flags with Puka.
that's fair.
Yeah, I see them too, but I don't see them, I would say, as to a degree as you guys do. I would say that the main reason I want to draft him here is because of the ADP. When you could look 2 to 3 picks back, you're looking at Malik Neighbors, Derrick Henry. I would personally take Malik Neighbors over Puka Nacua for this year alone. The Giants are going to be playing from behind. That offense is terrible. I just think that Neighbors is going to get 12, 13 targets a game, and he's just going to be eating it up just like he did last year. And I think the quarterback situation is marginally better. So I think that he's going to be getting better thrown balls as well.
The quarterback situation is better in New York than it is in LA.
No, I was saying the New
Oh,
York,
Oh,
whew.
no, it's better in New York than it was last year.
okay,
Say,
okay. That
you say this isn't
that
this
does
isn't
not.
Russell Wilson that took the Seahawks to the playoffs or the Super Bowl. Like this is post Broncos country let's ride. This is post Steelers
Yeah,
country let's weld. I
let's
mean
well.
this is like truly washed up Russell Wilson. I was gonna maybe fight you on that one because
I won't say a word against my king, but I will say I will say that I cannot deny that I would take Neighbors over Puka this year.
there you
And
go.
even though he is about, in our draft, he went 4 below, and I selected him myself because I couldn't let him fall any further.
What if Jackson Dart comes in week 6?
I think I'm still taking Neighbors.
Fair enough.
Oh.
I mean, that's like as opposite as you can get in a quarterback situation to have Stafford versus Jackson Dart.
Not saying that Jackson Dart is some perennial, this guy's gonna take Neighbors to, Justin Jefferson level, but I'm just saying, like, when I look at the two players and I look at their situation, I would love to see Puka Nacua meet Neighbors this year, but who knows? Because again, the injury concern and the other things, but I'm high. I'm also super high on Neighbors this year. I've tried to trade for him multiple times.
Pretty hot take there. Opportunity that's a pretty good segue into my. Oh, sorry. Wow, I almost went into my must draft pick. Jumped the gun a little bit. You know what? I will. There's no rules. Opportunity is massive. And that's why, Trevor, you're going to be a little bit surprised at this one. My must draft player this year is DeAndre Swift. And he's been a player that I have publicly besmirched and dragged over the coals for the entire offseason. Every time Trevor would say anything, I'd be like, "Well, you don't have a starting running back in DeAndre Swift, so your running back room is garbage." Um, and now here we are, and I'm saying you have to draft DeAndre Swift. And the argument for it is twofold. One is the opportunity. I think the opportunity is massive for this year. and you're getting him at the 701. That's where he went to Zach in our draft. If we were drafting with auto drafters, if it wasn't Zach at the 101, I don't know where he would have went. I didn't look up his ADP before this, but it would have been somewhere in there. Um, and so you have the opportunity of you're going to be Ben Johnson's bell cow for this year. Maybe he gets supplanted by Roshan Johnson. I don't I don't really see that. I think DeAndre Swift is an excellent athlete, and we've seen him succeed marginally when he has a really good offensive line. And so I think if he's getting 15 touches on the ground, 15 to 20 touches on the ground, and 2 to 3 targets a game, you don't really get that in the seventh round. The what you're looking at in the seventh round, you have Tyrone Tracy, you have a rookie in Caleb Johnson. I think he'll be higher than that. Travis Kelce, Khalil Shakir. I mean, you're at that point you're taking shots. You got Johnny Smith, Najee, Ayuk. I just think you're getting an incredible opportunity at a great value where DeAndre Swift doesn't have to be your running back one. He would have been on team eight. I keep laughing looking back at team eight's build where they went four receivers, Mahomes, then Khalil Shakir, Mark Andrews, Cam Skattebo in the ninth round was their RB1 and Ramondre was their RB2. That's a crazy build. But even anyways, the point is you don't have to have him as your RB1, RB2. Zach, you got him as your RB3 with taking Chase and McBride. I mean, you took four non-running backs and he was your running back three. So I just think the opportunity is right there in front of him. And in the seventh round, I'll pull that trigger every time.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can go ahead.
oh, sorry.
No, that's my
Go ahead.
fault. Done it twice. Now, good.
I completely agree with you. I think DeAndre Swift at the 701 is, I mean, that's an incredible opportunity. You got to draft him there, if he falls there. But for me personally, I have been high on Swift. I even in the highs and the lows, like I've always been there for Swift. And I think the main reason is because you look at what the Bears offensive line looked like last year, and it was just so poor. And you're now giving him, I don't know because we haven't seen this offensive line on the field, but the way that they restructured this offensive line, the way that they brought in Ben Johnson, these are all amazing signs. The fact that they weren't able to get a running back, even though like I kept saying like, oh, they're not going to because they have DeAndre Swift. They just couldn't end up taking one home. It seemed like there was always just one ahead, one team ahead, just drafting a running back right in front of them. But now you have a situation where you are competing. You're taking DeAndre Swift or Roshan Johnson, and DeAndre Swift has shown that he can put up good numbers, and Roshan just hasn't yet. I think they're going to roll with DeAndre Swift. He's also the better pass catching back, in my opinion. So I think that DeAndre Swift is going to get some light receiving work, but I think he'll also get 10 to 15 touches a game, somewhere around there, minimum.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I'm part of the I'm a DeAndre Swift hater for sure. I do not believe that he is a talented running back, but I do know that he is a very flashy athlete. I think that's the best compliment I can pay him. But that's so valuable in the NFL. You know what I mean? Especially when you give a coordinator who maximizes players in their roles. I mean, Ben Johnson got Jamal Williams, who I haven't watched him take a carry in what feels like 2 seasons, got him to 20 plus touchdowns like 3 seasons ago, 2 or 3 seasons ago. I think that DeAndre Swift is what he has to work with, and he's going to work well with him. I think that this is an amazing buy here. I will be trying to leave pretty much all of my drafts with DeAndre Swift. I do not see a threat from Kyle Monangai or Roshan Johnson. Um, at least to like taking over a bell cow role, you know what I mean? And he just profiles so well as someone who could even if they are kind of even if he is in a true committee and kind of splitting carries with the other two. I think that his carries will be the efficient ones. I think that he will catch passes. I think that he will score touchdowns. DeAndre Swift is such a great pick and redraft this year. I really love this take.
Yeah, and right after the season, I'm fully out on DeAndre Swift. Sell him as fast as you can. Um, because I mean, I firmly believe, like you look at the Eagles, he was he was a decent player for the Eagles. He was like a middling running back. I think he was a back end RB1 to mid RB2, and then Saquon comes in and almost breaks the rushing record. So you see what happens behind an elite offensive line with a guy like DeAndre Swift, and then a true difference maker like Saquon Barkley. So to me, it's not even close. He's not that good of a running back, but opportunities matter so much for running back that I just don't think it matters that much. So I mean, we kind of went out of order. I'll finish out our sells, our busts, and then we'll kind of just shake it around. All right, we'll keep it rolling. I will finish out our busts. I went the same direction as Zach did for the bust picks, trying to find a high ADP guy, and the guy that I found was Bucky Irving. He went 206 in our draft that we did last week. That's up on the screen. And to me, it's more of a cost pick than it is a skill pick. So he's going around Achan. Achan went right after him. I'd rather have Achan. If you want to go quarterback, Josh Allen is still on the board. You could take Jonathan Taylor, Lad McConkey, Chase Brown. I mean, Trey McBride. There's just so many guys that I think are sitting here that I would much rather have than Bucky Irving. And we were talking about it earlier, where Bucky had 1,500 yards since he took over in the middle of the season. And so, I mean, he did phenomenal. He did. Rashad White was getting all the opportunities for the past few years, and Bucky Irving took all those opportunities and actually did something with them. He did phenomenal. The hype this offseason is getting pretty out of control. I've seen ADP of 6 at the running back position. That's pretty high to me. And again, this is more of, I think Bucky's being drafted at his ceiling, and some guys that went right ahead of him, McCaffrey. I guess the point is, I don't see anybody that was drafted ahead of him, besides maybe AJ Brown, depending on your build, that I would say, yeah, I'm gonna go get Bucky over that guy. I think Bucky at 206 as your running back one is tough. I think if you could start, like if you were team 6 in this scenario and you could have started Gibbs Bucky, then I think that's a viable build. I just think the Bucky's being priced really, really, really high. I think he's being priced at a ceiling, and I think the guys going around him I would rather have.
Yeah, I was also pretty low on Bucky. Not, I wouldn't say falling out of the second round low, but where he's at, like being able to grab AJ Brown, if he slips there, or Achan is just the better back in my opinion. But I would say if Josh Allen is on the board, I mean that was the 1-1 last year. You got to grab him over Bucky any day of the week. Not that I think Bucky is like, a third or a fourth round talent, but the players around him are just too good to pass up.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm not excited taking Bucky there. It's hard to argue with what he did last year. He didn't get the full season. It took time to take over that backfield, but when he did, he just put up such good numbers. Now, granted, he was in an amazing offensive system designed by Liam Cohen. The offensive line is easily probably, I'd say, top 5 in the league. Um, so, and those things aren't going away. I think it's easy to see how he might do that again, but I think any regression in how good that offense was, and I think that a running back like Bucky Irving, who's a little bit undersized, didn't really have the greatest RAS score. So I know some people think he's super athletic. I'm not saying RAS score really is the end all be all for athleticism. I think he's a little too dancy. I don't think he really has a lot of those traits that make a truly elite running back, and he's being drafted with some running backs who are going to put up truly elite production this year. Um, I think he kind of falls a little bit on that Puka scale of, he's probably not going to be the worst pick of your draft, kind of hard to project what the worst pick of your draft is going to be. I just do feel pretty good on him not returning his value at where he's being drafted. And I think that's a good fade for that reason.
All right, so that wraps up our fades. Um, we'll have Trevor go next with his must. He's pretty in on David Montgomery, and I'm curious to hear why.
Yeah, so Monty is just one of those backs that if he's fallen to me in the beginning of the fifth round or even the late fourth and I pick around there, I don't know if I'm passing up on him. His ADP right now is 58, and he's graded as the running back 21, even though he was the 18 last year after missing 3 games. He is a pretty obviously he's a pretty serious handcuff to Jameer, which if you're able to get Jameer, I don't see you passing up drafting him in the fourth round, right? Like if you look at the running backs that can go around him, so like I believe that he went here in our draft at the 5-4. Personally, if I was the Jameer team, I probably would have taken Monty over Chuba just because having that handcuff and the fact that you could start him as an RB2 and feel comfortable he's going to get you 10 to 15 points is really, really good. Little scared losing Ben Johnson. That is scary, but John Morton is the new OC and he's been in that system for a while. He's not going to change anything. That's the most efficient running back room last year, and you just can't change it. And I don't think that it's going to slow down. I don't think teams are going to be able to stop this tandem any more than they could last year. If you're looking at the running backs that have similar value, you're looking at James Cook, who, isn't maybe getting as many touches or is getting similar touches to Montgomery. So, and I feel like Montgomery is just the better back in that situation. K9, very injury prone. If you want to take the risk, you are getting higher upside for sure. But if you want a more safer option, especially if you have Jameer, Monty's definitely the pick there. And then Chuba, not a bad pick. There is more competition in that room last year. I'm not saying Rico Dowdle is going to take over there, but it is possible he eats into the share. And then RJ Harvey, if you want to go with a rookie running back, that's great. But with J.K. Dobbins coming in, I'm still more confident in Monty outproducing him at that point.
I do find it really hard to draft a handcuff in the fifth round. I think he has pretty capped upside with the stipulation that if either Jameer or David Montgomery go down, the other guy, which we saw at the end of last year with Jameer Gibbs, is a top three running back. And I would push back a little bit on David Montgomery. I'm not super high on him this year just because it feels like everything is going in the wrong direction. He's been incredibly hot on touchdowns. Um, he has a ton of touchdowns over the past few years. And last year, the Lions were insanely efficient in getting touchdowns. And so you take a massively overpowered offense who loses their genius offensive coordinator, they lose their center, and even if they had those things and they were just regressed back to the mean, you now have an older David Montgomery. Um, and if some of the touchdowns don't bounce his way, if they ride Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit heavier this year, um, I think even if everything had stayed the same, I would still be saying David Montgomery should be lower than where he is. And now you lose your center, he was arguably one of the top two, and it might not have even been two best run blocking centers in the entire NFL. Ben Johnson, we obviously all think he's a genius. John Morton, he was with the Broncos last year, but like Trevor said, he was with the Lions before that, so he's very familiar with their scheme. So I don't think a whole lot changes, but I just think if they regress as an offense as a whole, with those pieces that they lose on top of that, then I don't think you're getting the highest upside pick in the fifth round. Now, I will say if you're not going for insane upside in the fifth round, David Montgomery should get you a pretty safe 10 points every week, and if he runs hot on touchdowns, then that's closer to 16 or 20. So I mean I could argue it both ways. I'm not sure I love Montgomery in the fifth round, but I definitely respect that pick.
Yeah, David Montgomery's solid if you already have like maybe a stud running back in your room at that point. Maybe you're drafting an RB2, someone that you really need to kind of provide a floor for you. Last year, David Montgomery was the RB 16 in terms of points per game. Now he's being drafted at, I believe, the RB 21. So you're getting a little bit of a discount there, but I do have a hard time drafting a 28-year-old running back coming off of an injured year in a year where, again, I don't think it can be understated how how good Ben Johnson is. I am fully all in on Ben Johnson being one of the coaches we speak of in the Shanahan McVay conversations in a few years. I think he is that good of an offensive mind as a play sequencer, as a just like an analytical genius. I think that losing Ben Johnson, yeah, I feel good about John Morton coming in, but I don't feel top five good. I think a lot of the ceiling, a lot of the 50-point games where they're just absolutely beating up on bad teams and just force feeding fantasy points to every offensive skill player they have. I think that that may not entirely disappear, but I'm very confident it will happen less than it did last year. And then you add on the fact that they lost one of the top interior offensive linemen in the league in Frank Ragnow. I just see a lot of room for regression, and he's not the best running back in his room. He is not the guy that they are going to need to go to when they really need to rely on someone. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. I'm not fading David Montgomery at ADP. I'm comfortable saying, yeah, I think he probably finishes around running back 21. I think I'm comfortable saying if or even if I don't have a running back yet, and I maybe loaded elsewhere, and I just need a safe floor from a running back, maybe I'm drafting David Montgomery there and feeling like, you know what, like I will. I'm just trying to make the playoffs and see what happens after that. I can get behind that for sure. But I'm not super excited about reaching on him. I would not be. I wouldn't call him a must in a sense of like I'm grabbing him in round four. Some of the names you said around him, like an RJ Harvey, I am more excited to have an RJ Harvey on my team than a David Montgomery, even with J.K. Dobbins there, just because of with the upside that he could bring in that offense. I like David Montgomery, not in full fade of David Montgomery, but I'm probably not going to have a lot of exposure to him this year, in all honesty.
I get that. I also am looking at the running backs taken after him. Like again, RJ Harvey, not a bad pick. Aaron Jones, I don't think is going to be the running back one there for a while. Isaiah Pacheco, like looking what comes back to you, specifically team four after the wrap, you're not looking at much. And I think that if you are going for a safe floor once you've gotten your RB1, then like for example, team four has Josh Jacobs, solid RB1. And having a safe floor RB2 is extremely important. I did not have that last year, and it definitely burned me. But overall, I think I'm just taking David Montgomery over some of the players that were drafted just right above him, like the K9 and like Chuba.
Yeah, I totally hear that. And you say names like Isaiah Pacheco and Aaron Jones, and I can't believe that Isaiah Pacheco and Aaron Jones are the two and three names behind David Montgomery. You're right. I'm absolutely smashing David Montgomery over those guys. Even James Conner ahead of him. Like I'm so nervous about just the age, the profile. I am nervous about James Conner, Chuba Hubbard, and Joe Mixon. Like, a little bit of pick your flavor there. I think that. I'm okay either way. I kind of group them all in the same tier. Kind of depends on my build and what I'm going for there. But you start getting behind them. You look at like a Quinshawn Judkins and a Henderson are going shortly after them. I like both of those players a lot. I think that both of those it's very easy to see a world where both of them outscore David Montgomery this year. DeAndre Swift, I'm taking DeAndre Swift straight up versus David Montgomery this year. I think. He's not someone I'll ever be reaching for. I think if he slides in the ADP, if maybe a couple people pass on him and I get him at a value, maybe I'm ecstatic about that. Maybe if I'm a Gibbs owner, and I feel good about trotting both running backs out on a week to week basis, and then feeling like if one goes down, the other kind of skyrockets in value. I probably feel good about that. Um, so yeah, I'm not in full fade, but definitely some more stuff to think about there than there was last year at this time when we were drafting David Montgomery.
So just some numbers with the total team touchdowns. They had 70 total touchdowns last year as a team. The Bills were second at 65, so that's already just insane. There were
That's 30
five
points.
points. Yeah, plus whatever extra points you make. Um, so you're already five touchdowns ahead of second place. If they regressed, I'm not saying they would regress this far, but if they regressed to number 10, the Vikings were 10th last year with 47 touchdowns. So if they
Oh my
regressed,
God.
so if they regressed and they were a top 10 offense, like fringe top 10, they would be dropping 23 touchdowns. And that's a number that's absurd. And I don't think they even dropped that far. If they dropped to number five, the Bengals were number five last year with 57 touchdowns. So even that, you're dropping 13 touchdowns. I think 13 to 20 touchdowns is easily in the range of outcomes to drop. And I think the one of the guys that gets hurt the most by that is David Montgomery. So
I agree. I do agree.
that part does scare me a little bit. And if it breaks the wrong way and Jamison Williams doesn't fall down at the one, a couple times, and he actually just gets some long touchdowns. I think there's a little bit of risk there, but it could also that's part of fantasy though. Like it could break the other way, and Jameson Williams falls down 5 times at the 1 yard line on bomb touchdowns where he gets tackled, and David Montgomery gets 15 touchdowns and he's just fine. Um, like Zach said, I think if he slides, he's a great pick at 504. He's still a solid pick, but I do worry about the total Lions regression there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Zach, you want to round us out?
I would love to. I am so excited about Chase Brown this year. We saw after the season a big slide in ADP, specifically startup ADP, because that's kind of going year round, a little bit of best ball ADP. We saw a slide with Chase Brown that was kind of predicated on the idea that the Bengals were going to draft a running back high. They brought in a lot of running backs on their 30 visits. They seemed very interested to get a running back. And on top of that, Chase Brown is a guy who was a fifth round pick. They weren't super invested in him. He never really took the job over. He kind of at the end of the year, maybe you could say lucked into the job a little bit with the Zach Moss neck injury. He's not someone that the Bengals are extremely excited about, and I think that's fairly clear. But the same adjustment we have to do for DeAndre Swift when they don't draft a running back, we have to do for Chase Brown when they don't draft a running back. I think that whether or not they're super excited about this 2 years in the future, three, even next year in the future, whether or not they're excited about having Chase Brown be their clear cut RB1, that is what he is this year. And the clear cut RB1 on an offense that we know is going to be absolutely elite is extremely valuable. Chase Brown is a pass catching running back. He gets the dump offs from Joe Burrow. He's still going to be good in garbage time if they're trailing. He is built to be an extremely productive fantasy running back. Last year, he got 8 games where he played over 80% of the snaps. This is after Zach Moss exited. In those 8 games, if you extrapolate the production over a 17 game sample, he was on pace for 1,989 scrimmage yards and 12.75 touchdowns. Overall, if you took his numbers and you added the receptions to that, I believe it was around 80 receptions he would have been on pace for. He would not finish below RB3 overall over any 17 game season he plays. We haven't really seen any big injury concerns from Chase Brown. We can reasonably expect that he is going to be the RB1 through the whole season for the Bengals. And I just think that getting him around, I forget exactly where I got him. I don't know if I have his ADP written down here. But I believe it's around round three, maybe around round four. Maybe you could fact check me on that. But I think that there are plenty of running backs going ahead of him that should not be. I would very much take Chase Brown over someone like Bucky Irving. I look at Kyron Williams going one pick in front of him. I'm smashing Chase Brown over Kyron Williams. No pause needed. Jonathan Taylor, I am not taking over Chase Brown. Josh Jacobs, a back I really like. I'm probably not taking him over Chase Brown this year. I think Chase Brown maybe not one RB1 overall season. Maybe I don't think that is necessarily in the range of outcomes. I think probably a Derek or a CMC or a Saquon is probably going to secure that. But I feel very, very good about him probably being top 6 to 8 this year. I think that feels almost like as safe a bet as a bet like that can be.
You got him with a 212 in our draft, which is great. I
I
mean,
think I reached a little bit. I may have reached a little bit to get him because I love him so much. So I'd say probably a third round pick.
but I mean also just a little bit of drafting strategy. It's tough. Like if you want your guy and you think he's going to be a mid third, fourth round pick, and you have the 212 and the 301, and you don't pick until the 412, like you don't get those middle of the third, middle of the fourth guys. You have to reach on him. Yeah, Chase Brown is one of those guys. You said it pretty good with the comparison to DeAndre Swift, where the all the news and everything pointed to them bringing in a high profile running back to run with him. And kind of the feeling was he kind of lucked into the job last year. It never really felt like Chase Brown just blew Zach Moss out of the water. It was more just Zach Moss got hurt. Chase Brown didn't have another Zach Moss on his tail. So then at that point, it's just Chase Brown. And he did a lot with his opportunities, but it kind of felt like he lucked into it. And then they were looking to replace him. Like everything's kind of pointed against Chase Brown. And then we get to this point in the year. like you said, and it's like you look up. Trey Hendrickson still isn't signed. Shamar Stewart still isn't signed. Bengals are still fumbling the bag there. They've got money to spend. They don't have the luxury of spending draft picks or money on running backs. So Chase Brown's he's locked and loaded for this year. He's a great pick. So to draft Jamar Chase at the 101 and come back with Chase Brown as your RB1, I think that is a incredibly solid pick and maybe one of the better picks of the second round. So to usually be able to get him in the third round, I mean,
He's
that's a
going late
great
third
spot to
right
take
now.
him.
80 ADP 33 overall on Sleeper right now. Late third.
That's, I mean, that's a phenomenal pick. If you can go, I mean, just looking at Trevor's team, if you could put Chase Brown instead of Jaden Daniels, if you could start Malik Neighbors, Drake London, Chase Brown, I mean, that's an insanely good start. To get a player that good with that level of workload in the third round with that team that I just mentioned, I mean, that's just insane. Great pick.
Yeah, I love Chase Brown here. Chase Brown is a player that I benefited from last year. And I think Chase Brown is a phenomenal player for the Bengals right now. I am in a pretty similar camp with DeAndre Swift where I'm buying him this year and selling him next year. I don't see them holding Chase Brown as one of those backs that you sign to a 4-year, $48 million deal. I just don't see it happening with Chase Brown, especially with how much money they have invested in that offense over a long period of time. I see them drafting another running back next year. However, this year I am taking him. I mean, if he fell to me at where team 6 is right now, like Achan and Jacobs, I'm taking Brown over Jacobs every single time. And I'm taking Brown maybe over Achan. I just don't think there's like a lot of competition in that quarterback room. My only concern would be that I think the Bengals are going to be playing from behind a lot just because of the way that that defense is just fallen apart. It's just going to be score after score, and Joe Burrow's just going to have to launch the ball. And Chase Brown may get some of the receiving work there, but I don't necessarily see him getting as much work as the receivers will. So as of this year, yes, I'm taking Chase Brown. I'm taking him probably higher than where Zach got him, but after this year, I think it's kind of a dice roll, which is why I also moved off of him in our dynasty league. Maybe kind of regretting that now, and I have made an offer to get him back actually, but that's besides the point.
Well, those
Yeah,
ones
that's kind of
hurt.
where I'm at Chase Brown.
Those ones hurt when you offer to get your guy back. You're like, oh, I kind of want him back, and they're like, hey, nope. I
Yeah,
was
that was
looking
one that left I got left on red on that one.
at I was looking at these touchdown numbers. I still haven't pulled up from looking at the Lions. So the Bengals last year were fifth. They had 43 passing touchdowns and 11 rushing touchdowns, which is by far the fewest rushing touchdowns of. I mean, the Lions had 29, Bills 32, Ravens 21, Bucks 16, Commanders 25, Eagles 29, 23, 12. I mean, the Vikings had 9, but then you keep going 18, 17, 18, 17, 15, 15. So like for the Bengals to be that elite of an offense and to only have 11 rushing touchdowns is pretty low. And Jamar isn't, I mean, he's elite, but he's not going to win the Triple Crown every year. So you could see a little bit of regression bouncing Chase Brown's way on the ground, getting some touchdowns potentially. All
Yeah, I'm
right.
probably not when we do our real draft in this league. I'm probably not going to end up getting Chase Brown where I got him, am I?
He seems like one of those guys where, like I said, the sentiment's been so down that his ADP's just been going down and down. And then people are gonna turn around and be like, wait a minute, there's no competition in that room. And then they start taking him at 212, and then pretty soon they're taking him at 210. And then he slides to maybe even being like a 203, 204 kind of guy.
He's going to rise pretty aggressively, in my opinion. One thing is casuals aren't drafting right now. Casuals are not putting putting mocks in the database right now. But when the people who have no idea who the Bengals hosted on their 30 visits, when they start drafting, they will remember the back end of the year for Chase
Yep.
Brown, and he's going to start pushing up the board for sure. I don't expect him to be at the back end of the third come draft day. I kind of don't expect him in the third round come draft day. I'm still very okay taking him wherever he is.
He's a great
I
running
think
back one.
everybody's pretty comfortable. I think everybody would feel comfortable with Chase Brown as their RB2 on their team, unless you're Micah, who wholeheartedly believes that Zach, wow, I
Zach
can't even remember
Taylor?
his last name. Zach Taylor,
Taylor.
that's how relevant he is now. Um, Zach Taylor being the RB1
Zach
on that team.
Moss. Yeah.
Zach Moss,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry. I thought you were
got
talking
me
about
Yeah.
on
their
there.
coach,
Yeah.
Zach Taylor.
No, Zach
Oh,
Moss.
okay.
He wholeheartedly believed that Zach Moss was the better back in that room, and clearly he was wrong.
Yeah, I like that
It's
we can get after Micah 3 times in one show. Can I get a Micah's gonna Micah?
yeah, Mike is definitely gonna Micah. I think it's a
Mike is gonna
good
Micah.
that backfield to me is a good predictor for this year. Like you said, going into drafts, it was kind of like, well, is it Zach Moss? Is it Chase Brown? I think it's good to take shots on ambiguous backfields, and if you hit right and you get Chase Brown, then that's how you win leagues. Um, just to kind of look at that going forward, that would be a good show to look at some ambiguous situations and some players that we maybe see breaking out of that. Um, so yeah, that's our must and our bust episode. Not a whole lot of news going on, no trades. Hopefully we'll have some real news that's not injury related. That's the hard part about this time of year is it's all this guy's looking so good, that guy's looking so good, or the real only concrete news is injury. So maybe we don't want any concrete news, but some hype to talk about maybe going forward. Maybe Braden will soften up and we'll get a trade done. We'll see. Um, but yeah, I think that's gonna wrap up episode number 7, and we will be back next week.
Have a good week, guys.
Have a good week, guys.